villa in Brazil, or a dusty field in Senegal, or on grass courts at Wimbledon. Sport builds healthy bodies, sharpens minds, and nurtures the spirit of rising heroes in communities, small and large, across the world. Infusing athletes with leadership skills, both on and off the field. Sport instills lifelong core values and is a catalyst for social and political action in societies across the globe. It is the foundation for a stronger society. It provides opportunity to individuals while unifying the many. Sport gives meaning to young people's lives while offering economic stability to communities. Sport cultivates a brighter tomorrow. It offers hope and provides a place where dreams can come true.
By the way, there'll be on your screens at some stage the Twitter handle for the forum. It's at Doha Goals. The hashtag is hashtag Doha Goals. So if you want to take part in the conversation on Twitter, that's where to go. So now there's a debate about the meaning of sport. It's such a broad subject. Everybody has their own idea. A lot of the time there'll be some common ground. Let me just briefly tell you what the meaning of sport is to me. I think it's about identity, and actually cultural identity to be more specific. And I can break that cultural identity down into three separate but related areas. First of all, national identity. There's a story about an English footballer, an Italian footballer, and a Dutch footballer. And the coach says to the English footballer, stand there on the pitch, 5 yards in from the touchline. The Englishman's reaction is, yes, sir. The coach tells the Italian player, stand there, 5 yards in from the touchline. The Italian says, yes, sir, but shouldn't I stand 6.5 yards in from the touchline? And the coach then tells the Dutchman, stand there, 5 yards in from the touchline. And the Dutchman looks at the coach and says, why? The point is the Dutch footballers are possibly the most free-thinking footballers in the world. It's arguable, but it's also a possibility that total football could only ever have been invented in the Netherlands, because the main religion in Holland is Calvinism, a branch of Christianity that teaches you to listen to the priest, but not to accept the priest's own interpretation of the Bible, but to read the Bible for yourself and then have your own interpretation. So that would be national identity. What about community identity? Where you live, who you live with, and how you relate to the players that play for your team. I'm giving you only football examples, my favorite sport. Some years ago, River Plate were playing Boca Juniors, the biggest derby, possibly in Latin America, definitely in Argentina. River won 2-0. There was so much violence between the two fans. Two of the opposing fans were killed. And so the Boca fans said, okay, that's 2-2. 2 deaths equivalent to 2 goals. And then finally, ethnic identity. Think back to the Yugoslav wars of the 1990s. There was a man called Zeljko Raznjatovic. His nickname, whatever it was Arkan. He was the man who was in charge of the militia called the Tigers. Arkan was the leader of the Ultras, the extremist fans of Red Star Belgrade. He founded this militia. A lot of them were also Ultras of Red Star Belgrade. At one stage, he took the Tigers to a Croatian enclave. They committed the atrocities that they did, and he came back to the Red Star Belgrade Stadium, and he held up the sign of the main road in that community, and the crowd went wild. He didn't have to say anything. They knew what it meant. Okay, so I've given you 3 pretty sad examples of identity and sport. I can give you many happy ones, and hopefully we'll talk about much happier things. with Lord Coe. Doesn't need any introduction, but of course I'm going to give him one. Who can forget your face when you cross the finishing line to win that gold medal in Moscow? Two-time Olympic champion in the 1500 meters, 1980-84. Two-time silver medalist in the 800 meters. Dr. Deng YAPING, 18-time world table tennis champion. I couldn't believe it when I read it. And how long were you world number one for?
8 years.
Say again?
8 years.
Say again?
8 years.
Say again? Incredible. 8 years world number one. Amazing. Fantastic. Wilfried LEMKE works for the United Nations. Ban Ki-moon, UN Secretary General, appointed you as your official title is Special Advisor on Sport for Development and Peace, and you took that job in 2008. But actually, with Werder Bremen, you were the General Manager, is that the correct title, of Werder Bremen for 18 years?
Nearly 18 years,
Incredible.
until 99.
That's right, and a famous, famous club it is as well.
It's a famous club, but right now, let's don't talk about Werder Bremen. We are not so good playing, but I want to add what Tokyo Sexuale said before. There's not only Barcelona and Madrid, but also Werder Bremen and a big number of clubs fighting against racism.
Everything goes in cycles. You know, Lord Coe supports Chelsea, and he remembers the bad days. Hani THALJIEH, you work for FIFA now as Director of Corporate Communications?
No, Corporate Communications Manager.
Corporate
in
Communications
the
Manager.
Communications and Public Affairs Division.
But on the pitch, you founded the Palestinian national women's team,
The co-founder of the national...
and you were the first captain.
The first captain ever.
What position?
Number 10.
Number 10,
You can guess.
the best number in the world. The best number in the world. And Johanna BENSON, in 2012, the games that Lord Coe organized in London became Namibia's first ever gold medalist in any Olympic Games. She won the T37 200 meters. T37, because it's quite technical, T37 is for ambulant athletes who have cerebral palsy, with which Johanna was diagnosed shortly after her birth. And with her is her coach, Belinda Oberholster. So this is your panel, ladies and gentlemen. Seb, when you think about sport, what's the first image that comes to your mind?
Cohesion, actually.
Is that an image?
Yes, I think it is. It's, you know, you were talking about the great moments in sport. I know that Ilana Meyer is here speaking in one of these sessions. That moment that she crossed the line with the Kenyan athlete in, I think it was Dorata Tulu, in Barcelona in 1992, summed up the extraordinary journey and then what that could mean on an Olympic track. So there are any number of images that it conjures up, but I don't know any other activity in the world that can bring people together in such a meaningful way than sport. It gets to places that politicians don't get within a country mile of.
How much has it changed since you were racing?
It's become much more global. Commercially, it's a much more complex landscape. I'm now going to carbon date myself, but I was, you know, really very. I had an interesting career because half of it was really in the amateur era, the 75p meal voucher, the second-class rail ticket, and then suddenly the sport became open in the 80s, and you know, top athletes could then earn handsomely from it. But it is now a very much more complicated and complex landscape, commercially, socially, and actually politically as well.
Dr. Deng, does China see it that way as well? And it could be argued that China was sort of almost a latecomer, given the size of the nation, to the international sporting scene in terms of having success. But does it now recognize the power of sport?
Actually, Chinese sports are becoming quite stronger now, and we have a very good training system, which is a very concrete training system, which is 3 levels. Spare time sports schools, the first level, and a training system for the provincial level and the national level. So that is we have a massive training the children's, and we can select the best talented athletes become that system. But on the other hand, we have only good at a few really strong sports. For example, table tennis and badminton. But we are really not good at track and field and football, which
I wouldn't tell Liu Jiang that.
Yes, yeah.
I know that the track and field world championships will coming to Beijing next year. So hopefully we encourage young people to participate more track and field rather than in table tennis and the sports. Yeah, and for the badminton or the divings.
I want to ask you about China's process of developing athletes a little bit later. Wilfried, how does the United Nations get involved in sport?
Well, I think first I have to say that IOC and all the big worldwide federations do a wonderful job, and so we should not be involved in elite sport. United Nations is looking on the grassroots level of sports, how we can use sport as a tool for development and peace. So that is the main objective of my work.
Can you give us some concrete examples of where the UN has been successful in developing sporting projects that lead to development, that help peace?
Yeah, but we are delayed half an hour. I think we should then end at midnight. But to give you some very brief examples. In Vietnam, I visited a project that was founded by 9 ladies, mothers, who are infected with HIV/AIDS. And their children were totally excluded in their villages. And they had the idea to organize or to launch a football project for this village. There was no pitch, there was no coaches, no balls, nothing. They started this with the support of different partners, and they were absolutely successful. Their children were integrated, included in society. The first example. The second example is quite brand new. I got an email 2 or 3 weeks ago asking me to support the people who are engaged in the health problems, Ebola problems in Liberia. And they asked for help because the people of the Football Association in Liberia don't want that UN take their stadium, a very new, good stadium, for a mobile hospital. And here, it was very, very positive. We got the answer. I immediately sent this request to FIFA, and FIFA in 24 hours reacted and say, we will take care that if something was destroyed or if there's any problem after they leave their mobile hospital, they will pay $300,000 to repair it. And as well, they supported us with $150,000 for the 3 involved countries. A very, very good example of partnership between politics, the United Nations, and the FIFA, for example. But I can continue until midnight, but that's it.
No, I think it's a very interesting point because Ebola and any other international crisis always impacts on sport. Just about a week ago, a Sierra Leonese player spoke to the BBC and he said, when we play opposing teams now, they don't want to shake our hands. They don't want to exchange shirts with us. Honey, the Palestinian women's national team, how has that affected social ideas, the local culture in Palestinian territories?
Well, first, I put my voice to your voice when you said that sport is all about identity. And for us as Palestinians, sport is an identity. I mean, I take the example of the Palestinian female players growing up in a patriarchal society and playing a male activity. It's also was a present for us. And also being under occupation and oppression all our lives is also a present for us. And also as Arab, with the image, with the image that we have with prejudice and stereotypes, it also was a present for us. So football gave us a platform to break out of our presence and have a unique opportunity to practice our sport, to play it fair, and also a pride for our nation, to raise our flags high and say, listen, to the world. We are under occupation, we have a lot of presence and barriers, but we play football, which is a peaceful game, which brings people together, which gives opportunities for young girls to get out of their homes, out of refugee camps, out of a less privileged area, and play football free from prejudice, free from barriers, free from restrictions. So, and football took me to that place that I empowered myself and broke all these barriers with my team, with the support from the federation, from the Supreme Council, from all the sports leaders who were very supportive to women in Palestine to get to a nice level. And now we started 10 years ago with 5 female players, but now we have hundreds of female players playing in 4 national teams. And also we can see more and more women in the Palestine Football Association and in the Supreme Council of Youth and Sport.
So you're talking about inclusivity, which is always the ideal for sport, and yet there is so much exclusivity still. I mean, not just talking about fans who might be able to go and see games, but also you think about how many Formula One drivers there are in the world. Okay, there are only 20-something. It's such an elite event. Football. There may be hundreds of thousands of professional footballers in the world, but there are millions of kids who aspire to be professional footballers, and they can't. That's a certain kind of exclusivity. And just on Saturday, in Iran, a lady called Gonche Govami, who is a law graduate from London, but Iranian, was sentenced to 1 year in prison in Tehran for trying to watch a volleyball match. Italy's men were supposed to play Iran's men. She was arrested 4 months ago, and now she has a 1-year prison sentence. And the state says, it was a closed court, says that she was engaged in anti-regime propaganda. But who's going to get her released? What sort of international pressure, for example, can the United Nations bring, Wilfried?
Yeah, I've been in Tehran 1 year ago, and I joined the volleyball match between Germany and Iran. I was invited by the German Federation, and I was wondering because there were women in the hall, but they're only working, journalists and others. There were women in the hall. And I think it is incredible that this lady, if it would be just the fact that she was demonstrating for the rights of women, that she has to go to prison. Immediately when I read this story, I get in touch with the embassy in Geneva, the Iranian embassy, and we're still waiting for an explanation because this is absolutely not the way that we want to deal with women in sports. It must be, of course, we must respect some cultural backgrounds, but on the other hand, we cannot accept that women, Iranian women, will now be punished with 1 year going to prison only because she said we would join the match of the Iranian team because she wanted to cheer their team. And it's so absolutely clear for me, from my personal point of view, that we should try to change this, and we will do it in a very appropriate way because we are diplomats, and from the UN we cannot take a tank, we just have to do it with good arguments. And I'm really looking forward, no, I'm not looking forward, I hope for a change, and with or through communications.
Seb, David Cameron's involved in this, isn't he, in some way, making some sort of call?
Well, actually, the point I was going to make, I think, is one that we shouldn't overlook. And in a way, I guess it sort of buttresses the observation I made at the beginning, that sport can actually get to places and shine a light on conditions that politicians tend not to be able to do. Would we, had that not taken place, and I don't know the background to this story clearly, but had that issue not taken place in a high-profile sports event, would we be sitting on this panel tonight discussing it? So I think we do have to always make the point that sport is never an inhibitor of social change. In fact, the International Olympic Committee has made some of the most far-sighted and brave decisions to go to places that at the time the erudite scribblers have sort of sat and said, well, you can't possibly do that. You know, Moscow in 1980, a decision made in 1973. I went. I also like to feel that I was at least a part of the infancy of change. In 1988, we went to Seoul when 50% of the world didn't recognize them diplomatically. Samaranch was talking about taking the Beijing Games in 2000, that ultimately went to Beijing in 2008, as early as 2000, and a bid in 1993. So I think we really have to recognize that sport, yes, you know, it has its mutations, we have our challenges, but I can't think of another single activity that has the ability to shine a light on the human condition in the way that sport does. And it's actually often the light that shines that brings the politicians to the table. So we've got to be quite careful here not to forget. And the other point I would have made very quickly in support of Wilfried's observations about the United Nations, as you know, when a city hosts a games, a few months beforehand, you go to the United Nations, you table the motion that basically enshrines the Olympic truce. For the first time in United Nations history, the Olympic truce motion, actually any motion, was countersigned by every signatory and every nation. And, you know, sport does actually get to these places, and it's often overlooked. We often sort of carry the burden, well, should we be there and should we be doing that? Actually, we should always do that. We should always keep pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, so again, you're talking about inclusivity. Johanna, Benson, you are a great example of inclusivity because the Paralympic movement is undoubtedly at the forefront of any sporting movement in bringing people into competition, bringing them together, whereas previously they may have been ignored. And Johanna, I believe you have a message for the Doha Goals Forum.
Yes, I have a message. Good evening, all guests of honor as noted. I believe if you enhance sport, you create positive atmosphere, better relationship, and good morals. What do you need to make a difference in sport? All we need to know: commitment, technique, training, endeavor, talent, and especially to lead by the example. I am crazy about running. My success and achievement are a bonus. My success definitely motivates people, but is that enough? My coach convinced me to speak public speaking. I know how to run, but to talk in front of people, it's a huge challenge. My first speech think outside the box gave Walvish Bay High School a view on the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow. They heard that I experienced the same fear as them. After a stand observation and positive response, I realized that people rich and poor need to hear the voice of sport and possibility to be successful. I want to motivate all sports stars to make time to visit, train, and talk to people. Encourage them to give their all in sport, even if they are not sports stars. You don't need all the money in the world. For example, need one soccer ball to set a soccer team and keep 22 kids busy for hours. The more people try to be sports stars, the less they will be ruin society. I thank you.
Well done.
Thank
Johanna, how different is your life today compared to one day before you won the gold medal? How different?
It was very different. Before I compete or I went for the games, I didn't really expect that I was able to go and win a gold medal, because my aim was to just go and do my best and enjoy the race.
And I'm sure that even if you weren't a Paralympic athlete, you would still just enjoy sport because you love it so much.
Yes, I enjoy every moment that I'm having, so I love doing it, and every moment I'm just enjoying the competitions that have been there.
Well, I saw you win that gold medal. I must say it's fantastic that you're here with us today. Dr. Deng, I've heard many, many stories we all have about how sport can help social development, can take young people out of troubled situations and give them a better life. And I said I was going to ask you this question. It's about how China develops its champions. There are many people outside of China that believe it's a heartless process, that it's essentially manufactured in a kind of factory type of way. First of all, would you think that is a fair assessment? And anyway, even if it was a fair assessment, is there anything wrong with that as far as China is concerned?
That's a really tough question.
Thank you.
What do you think that the manufacturing produce the athletes from China?
Taking maybe a 6-year-old, taking them to a table tennis academy, teaching them all the techniques. Yeah, I could go on for ages. You know the way in table tennis you get an opponent who's your sparring partner to emulate the style that you will encounter when you go to the competition. You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can tell you that I started earlier than 6. I started when I was 5, and because my father was my coach, and even that I started with the hat only over on the table. And when I was about 10 years old, I won most of the champions around the provincial competitions. But for my experience, that the older coaches, which is rejected me because they think I won't be good in the future. No any the hope, no any training reasons for me because I'm too short. So what to believe that, and I have to show I have the capability be one of the best athletes in the world in table tennis. So I have to keep my dream, because when I was young, I had a dream to become world champion and Olympic champion as well. But I have to show that I have the twice as hardest as others for the training. And finally, for the national team coaches, discuss about me for these 3 times. Even I won most of the champions in my same age in whole China. But what is they said? They had 3 times the meeting, and all 2 times the meetings, the 5 coaches in national team, only 4, the only one accepted I can get into the national team. And what is the last meeting they had? The head coach said, because you think Deng Yaping is too short, which is this is a disadvantage for her. And I have a different way to see, because of she is too short. She can see the ball always higher. So can talk all the time without any defense. So is everybody play table tennis? No reaction. Yes,
oh, yes.
So what do you understand? Because sometimes we have to see different way. I think one thing always have 2 sides. Depends on what side you look at it. So that is for normal people. They think higher you can cover better for the table. But for me, for the table tennis, the more important is the speed and the tucking. So I have that and also have the talent to show. I'm so quick and so strong for the tucking. So this is a little my story until I won the first champion at age of 16 years old, and start my dominating for the world table tennis for 8 years. So won 18 world titles. But I want to say that you have be confident, be trust yourself, and training harder, obviously. And also I meet so many good people and the coaches to helping, even the teammates to help me. So I think the training, everybody the same for the world athletes. Even you can ask Lord Cole. We have a training extremely hard. Otherwise, you can't become the world champions. So I think not only for China, everyone the same.
Okay, we are actually out of time, but Seb, you want to say something?
Well, I was just smiling when I heard the question and then the answer, because I remember in my early teens finishing a training session at the side of a municipal track in the city that I was brought up in Sheffield. And my father was my coach, and 5 coaches came out of the clubhouse and started to remonstrate with him and said, this training is too hard, it's heartless, and being a good engineer that always sort of lived by the rule, why use one word when none will do? He actually on that occasion used 2 words. And they flew back into the clubhouse, and thank goodness he did, because there is no way around that. If you are going to be world class, if you are going to do what my fellow athletes up here have done, there are no shortcuts. It's a long, hard road, and some of those physical literacies that you need to have in place for an athlete to be able to explore their own potential needs to be put in place in some sports very much earlier than in others. So it's very easy to sort of look at a system and say, well, they're all 6 years old. Well, the reality of it is that a child in gymnastics start losing flexibility from the age of 3.5. So there are things that you are going to need to do at that age in order to set them on the path to international gymnastics. The broader point I would make is I've never yet ever met anybody at the highest level of sport that hasn't been passionately engaged and enjoyed every minute of what they've done. That's not to say the results always come your way, but you can't keep people involved in sport unless they really want to do it.
Okay, we've gone over time, and there was so much more to talk about, and I'm sorry I couldn't get all of you to say everything you wanted to say, but as Wilfried said, we'd be here past midnight. Thank you very much indeed, everyone. Thank you.
Well done.
Thanks, Seb.
Sport is discipline.
Collaboration.
Unity. Energy.
Harmony.
Connecting.
Sports is happiness.
Hope.
Mentality.
Perseverance.
Opportunity. Character.
Sport to me is meant to be inspirational.
Sport is transcendent.
Happiness.
Success. Commitment.
Change.
Breaking your limits.
Excellence.
Sport is dynamic.
Diversity.
Passion.
Community.
Sports is life.
Resilience.
Freedom. Freedom.
Sports means life for me.
It's exhilaration.
I would say sport means power.
Uncertainty of outcome.
It's a school of life.
Passion.
Sport means social.
Development.
Independence.
Sport is life. The rest is just mere detail.